My name is Natalia, 38 years old. I remind myself of that, my age, my adulthood, my autonomy. Every time I take on more than I should, every time my family assumes I will fix everything simply because I always have. I've been a dentist for 12 years now, long enough that the hum of my drill feels like a second heartbeat. My days begin at 7 a.m., often end past 6 p.m., and are filled with cracked molars, complaints about toothaches, and polite conversations with weary patients. It's not glamorous, but it's stable, predictable, and in my world, predictable has always meant safe. My parents are approaching their 40th anniversary. 40 years of surviving together, enduring together, sacrificing together. Dad is 63, Mom is 61. When I think about everything they carried so I could stand where I stand, it knocks the breath out of me. 2 jobs for Dad, sewing late into the night for Mom, cheap spaghetti dinners, 5 nights a week. I wore hand-me-downs until I was old enough to buy my first pair of jeans with babysitting money. We grew up in a small apartment on the south side of town, Jacob and me. He's 3 years younger, 35 now, married to Madison with 2 energetic kids, a boy who's 10, a girl who's 7. Jacob works in sales, though even after all these years, I still don't know what he sells. Madison used to work at a bank doing something customer service related. They live in a rented apartment across town, just big enough for 4 people and a restless dog. I decided when I was 10 that I would take care of my parents someday. I remember watching Dad drag himself through the door, shoulders slumped, hands dirty from the warehouse. Mom would rub her temples from staring at sewing seams for hours. I'd promise myself, quietly, fiercely, one day, I'll give them the life they deserved, but never had. And I did. When I finished dental school and opened my own practice, the money began to come. Good money, stable money. I started paying their bills immediately. Electricity, water, gas, internet, rent every single month, groceries, medications, extra things here and there. They protested at first, insisted they didn't want to be a burden, but I pushed. They had carried me through childhood. I could carry them through the rest. What I didn't expect was how much they'd want to carry Jacob too. It started small. Mom buying extra groceries with the money I sent, then packing half to give to Jacob. Dad slipping him cash when Jacob dropped by to vent about how tight things were. I once stopped by their apartment unannounced and caught Dad handing Jacob a folded bill, like they were exchanging a secret. It annoyed me. It hurt more than I ever admitted, but I didn't say anything. Parents love differently, and my parents loved Jacob with a softness they didn't quite offer me. Still, I kept helping. I paid for the kids' textbooks, covered their rent 3 different times when Jacob said he was short, paid for braces because Madison insisted their children deserved the best. Last year, I even gave them money for a family car because Jacob said the bus route wasn't safe anymore. Giving didn't bother me. What bothered me was how invisible the giving became, expected, absorbed into the background, unacknowledged. When the anniversary approached, I knew I needed something bigger than a check, something lasting, something that would stand in for every sacrifice my parents made. That's when I found the house. It was listed online, a small lake house, 2 hours from the city. The price, $275,000, made me pause, but the photo made my breath catch. White terrace, windows overlooking the water, soft sunlight hitting the lake like melted gold. I drove out on a Saturday and toured it myself. Old, built in the 70s, slightly outdated, but charming. Peaceful. A place where my parents could finally exhale. I bought it, paid in full. Set up a trust with them as lifelong beneficiaries, meaning they could live there as long as they wanted, but couldn't sell or transfer it. Perfect protection from outside interference. And yes, even from Jacob. I paid 20 years of property taxes and HOA fees up front, changed the locks, had new keys made, everything immaculate, prepared, safe. A week before the anniversary, I told them. Mom looked terrified, like I was about to deliver bad news. Dad just folded his hands like he always does when he's bracing for something heavy. When I said, I bought you a house, they froze. Mom blinked rapidly. Dad's mouth parted, but no sound came out. A house? A house by the lake? Mom whispered. It's small, I told them, but it's yours. You can retire there. It's paid for. Mom burst into tears. Dad wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. That night, we drove out to see it. They explored every room, touching walls, looking out windows, whispering to each other like they were afraid it was a dream. They stayed up late on the terrace, talking softly, watching moonlight ripple over the water. I listened through the open window, heart full, exhausted, grateful, hopeful. The next morning, I had to leave early for work. They stayed behind, excited to enjoy their new home. 2 days later, everything changed. Jacob called Mom. I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine the conversation. Jacob asking casual questions at first, then sharpening. Mom fumbling, her voice tightening the way it does when she's trying to lie. She told him they were at a beach house. Jacob asked, "What beach house?" She panicked, tried to dodge the question. But Jacob doesn't let go, not when he thinks there's something to gain. Eventually she broke, gave him the address. That evening, Jacob showed up at the lake house with Madison, the kids, and the dog. Mom called me around 9. Her voice trembled. "Jacob's here," she said. "They're settling in. He said they'll stay for the weekend." I froze in my kitchen. "Mom, tell them they can't stay." "I tried," she whispered, "but Jacob said it's a family house, and he's family." I stared at the wall, phone pressed against my ear, feeling something inside me crack like thin ice under too much weight. For the first time, a thought rose. What if my gift becomes their takeover? And somewhere deep inside, a darker thought whispered a warning, one I didn't want to believe yet. Jacob doesn't just want to visit, he wants to claim. By Friday afternoon, the pit in my stomach had hardened into something sharp. I tried to focus on work, root canals, fillings, polite small talk, but every time I paused, my mind drifted back to the lake, back to Jacob's voice, back to the tremor in Mom's. I told myself not to panic, that maybe they really were just visiting, but a part of me, an old instinctive part, knew better. During my lunch break, I opened my phone out of habit, scrolled, then stopped cold. A photo stared back at me. Jacob, standing in my parents' kitchen at the lake house, beaming like he'd won something. He held a mug in his hand, the caption below reading, "Home, sweet home. Home, sweet home." For several seconds, my brain refused to process it. Then the comments hit me like waves. "Nice place, man. You finally did it. Congrats, huge upgrade." And then Madison's comment, "At last the children have a place where they can be children." My blood pressure rose so fast I felt it behind my eyes. I texted my mom immediately. "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'm coming Sunday." I canceled my afternoon appointments for Sunday, ignoring the guilt. Patience would survive. My parents might not. The drive to the lake that weekend felt twice as long. Clouds hung low, pressing against the windshield as if mirroring my mood. The closer I got, the tighter my grip on the steering wheel became. I kept imagining the worst. Jacob convincing them to hand over something they legally couldn't. Madison making herself comfortable in one of the bedrooms. Boxes being unpacked. Doors closing. When I finally turned into the driveway, I heard shouting from inside. My pulse surged. I got out, hurried up the steps, and pushed open the unlocked door. Madison stood in the middle of the living room, finger jabbing toward my mother. My father sat in a chair by the window, small and quiet, staring down at his hands, hands that had worked for decades, hands that deserved peace. "You're old," Madison said. Her voice was cold and edged with entitlement. "You don't need this house. Jacob and I can manage it. We'll take care of everything." Mom stammered, "But Natalia gave it to us." Madison cut her off, voice rising. "Natalia gave it to you, and you're giving it to us, which makes it our home." Jacob lounged on the couch as if he belonged there, as if he'd always belonged there, smirking. "Mom, don't be dramatic," he added, dismissive. "We're just doing what's best for the family." Madison continued, "I already put the house on Airbnb. This place is prime property, near the water, peak season coming. We'll make good money. And in winter, you two can stay here as free guards." Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad still didn't look up. Jacob looked proud of himself, like he'd solved some complicated puzzle. Something inside me snapped, but what came out was cold, not hot. "Looks like I got here just in time." My voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone whipped around. Madison went pale. Jacob's smirk vanished. My parents looked relieved, shoulders softening as if they'd been holding their breath for hours. "Everyone in the living room," I said, "now." Jacob stood reluctantly. Madison crossed her arms, but she moved. My parents stayed where they were, Mom trembling, Dad fragile but alert. I walked to the dining table and placed my bag down, pulling out the folder I'd prepared before driving over. I spread out 5 documents. When I spoke, I kept my voice steady. This is the deed. Registered a week ago. The property belongs to a trust. I tapped the second document. This is the trust instrument. I am the trustee. My job is to maintain the property for my parents' comfort. Only my parents have the right to live here, no one else. Jacob shifted uncomfortably. I picked up the next sheet. This is the Airbnb ad Madison created. Photos of the house, description, dates, a bank account connected to her name. Madison's face drained of color. I lifted the 4th document, printed messages. This is the group chat Dad forwarded to me. Jacob wrote, and I quote, "I'll force Natalia to agree. She always gives up if Mom cries." My father flinched. Mom gasped softly. Jacob looked away. Finally, I held up the last paper. HOA rules. Short-term rentals are prohibited. Posting this property on Airbnb violates community regulations, the trust agreement, and local statutes. Silence fell. Heavy, uncomfortable, exposing. "You're going to pack your bags today," I said quietly. "You're going to delete the ad. You're going to cancel every booking, refund everyone, apologize to Mom and Dad. Leave the keys on the table." Jacob laughed under his breath. "And what if we refuse?" I pulled out my phone, turning the screen toward him. "I have letters drafted to the Homeowners Association, our lawyer, and the police for trespassing. And a locksmith named Mark is waiting 2 houses away." Madison stood abruptly. "You can't do this. This is our home." "No," I replied, "it's not." As if on cue, Mark's truck pulled into the driveway. A broad-shouldered man in his 50s stepped out with a toolbox. He nodded at me. "You ready?" he asked calmly. "Yeah, get to work." Madison stormed outside, screaming at him. "You have no right. This is illegal. I'll call the police." Mark didn't even glance at her. He removed the front lock with seasoned precision. The next 3 hours were chaos. Madison had a meltdown in the driveway, kicking the curb, slamming her phone against her palm as she yelled at someone, probably a friend she hoped was a lawyer. The kids quietly packed, embarrassed. The dog barked ceaselessly, sensing the tension. Inside, I made tea with Mom in the kitchen. Each time she wiped her tears, I felt my chest clench. "I didn't want to bother you," she whispered. "We thought we could fix it on our own." "You're not a burden," I said softly. "They took advantage of you." Jacob tried to corner me 3 different times. "We wanted the kids to spend more time with Mom and Dad." "You're never around. Someone has to help them." "You think money gives you power. You're buying their love." The 3rd time, I set my cup down and looked him in the eyes. "You're just a spoiled brat." He opened his mouth, then closed it and walked away. By the time the locks were changed and Mark handed me the new keys, Madison was holding the old set like a lifeline. When Mark told her they were useless now, she threw them on the ground. They packed. Jacob paused at the car door, glaring at me. "You'll regret this," he said, "when Mom and Dad need help and you're not around." "I'm always around," I replied. He got in the car. Madison slammed the door hard enough to rattle the window. The kids climbed in silently. They drove off without saying goodbye to my parents. I spent the next hour cleaning. Juice boxes, crumbs, dog hair, wiping away every trace of their intrusion. That night, we ate pasta on the terrace as the sun dipped into the lake, painting the water gold. My parents seemed calmer, grateful but exhausted. My phone buzzed on the table, messages from Jacob and Madison, long rants about how cruel I was, threats about lawsuits. I set the phone face down and kept eating. The next morning, I installed alarms, cameras, sensor. Everything linked to my phone. I wasn't going to let anyone take this house from my parents again. Not Jacob, not Madison, no one. For a while, life settled into something that almost resembled peace. Not perfect, not healed, but steady. I returned to my normal rhythm. Early mornings at the clinic, the soft hum of my equipment, the predictable cadence of patients cycling in and out. And every weekend, I drove out to the lake house, where the quiet water and the smell of pine made everything inside me loosen just a little. Mom and Dad were beginning to blossom in their new environment. It was subtle at first. Dad spending longer on the terrace each morning with his coffee, Mom humming again while tidying the kitchen. They planted flowers along the walkway, added cushions to the terrace chairs, bought a bird feeder. I watched them transform from people who survived to people who lived. For once, they weren't worrying about rent or bills or whether Jacob needed something. They were just existing, growing roots. Jacob didn't like that. 2 weeks after the eviction, he started a smear campaign online. He posted an Instagram story with a black background and white text, "When money makes you cruel." Another one with a blurry family photo. Some people forget where they came from. I saw them because mutual friends sent screenshots. Quiet, hesitant messages that always began with, "Hey, didn't know if you wanted to see this, but..." I never responded. Not to the friends, not to Jacob. Silence felt cleaner than defending myself to people who only saw half the picture. But ignoring him didn't mean he stopped. In a group family chat, Jacob wrote, "She stole the house from my kids." Then later, "She kicked us out, in front of the neighbors, like we were criminals." I didn't reply. Instead, I called my aunt, Dad's sister, someone who understood family loyalty, but also knew Jacob's patterns better than anyone. I told her everything. Every detail of the Airbnb listing, Madison's meltdown, Jacob's manipulation, the trust documents, my parents' fear, my mother's tears, Jacob's group chat messages. She listened in silence. After I finished, she exhaled slowly and said, "Leave it to me." And she did. Within 2 days, the entire family knew the real story. One cousin called the Airbnb scheme disgusting. Another said, "Jacob always takes advantage of kindness." A quiet shift happened. Sympathy moved away from him and toward my parents, and, reluctantly, toward me. That same week, I drafted a formal letter to Jacob and Madison with 3 simple points. All questions regarding the lake house must go through me. Neither of them has permission to enter or approach the property. Any violation will result in immediate action from the HOA and our lawyer. I sent it by email and certified mail. No ambiguity, no loopholes, no emotional cushioning. 2 days later, while sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, I checked Airbnb on a whim. A gut feeling. One of those small, intuitive tugs you ignore at your own risk. There it was, another listing. New username, same photos, same descriptions, same dates, same house. Madison had tried again. My hands trembled, not with anger this time, but with something colder. A realization. This wasn't about need, it was about entitlement. A belief that if she pushed enough, lied enough, twisted enough, she could still claim something that wasn't hers. I took screenshots, compiled them with the trust documents, and sent everything to Airbnb's safety team. 10 minutes later, the listing vanished. Madison's account, banned. After that, I stopped checking. I blocked their numbers, unfollowed them, removed them from the perimeter of my life like extracting a splinter that had been lodged too deep for too long. Weeks passed. The lake house grew warmer, cozier, more theirs. My parents discovered a Saturday farmers market nearby. Dad bought a telescope and spent evenings looking at constellations he'd forgotten the names of. Mom started sketching again, something she abandoned decades ago. They were aging backward before my eyes. But peace never lasts untouched. One Thursday evening, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I almost declined it. Something, maybe habit, maybe intuition, made me answer. "Hello?" I said. A pause. Then Jacob's voice, quiet, strained. "Natalia, it's me." My throat tightened. I considered hanging up, but curiosity pinned me in place. "What do you want?" He exhaled shakily. "We're in debt." There was something raw in his tone. Vulnerability, or the performance of it. Hard to tell after years of blurred lines. "Madison lost her job. We're behind on rent. We've been struggling." I stayed silent. He pushed on. "We need help. Just for a few months, until we get things together." There it was. Not the first time he'd said those words, but this time, something inside me, something that used to soften, stayed still. Cold. "That's not my responsibility," I said. He inhaled sharply. "Natalia, please, I'm your brother. You tried to steal from our parents." I made a mistake. "You made a choice," I corrected. "Several, actually." He hesitated, voice cracking. "You're really going to do this? You're going to let us struggle?" "You created the struggle," I said evenly, "and I won't bail you out anymore." Silence stretched, heavy, growing roots. Then he whispered, "You'll regret this." "No," I said, "I won't." And I hung up. He never called again. My parents still spoke to Jacob occasionally, but something fundamental had changed. They checked in on the kids, asked about school, birthdays, small things. But they no longer offered money. No groceries slipped into bags, no rent covered, no emergency loans. For the first time in decades, they were parenting with boundaries. One Saturday morning, Mom and I sat on the terrace sipping coffee. Sunlight shimmered off the lake, painting the water with gold. I feel guilty, she admitted quietly. For what? I asked. For not helping him anymore. For letting him struggle. You didn't fail him, I said gently. He's an adult. He made his choices. But he's still my son. And you're still his mother. But that doesn't mean letting him hurt you. Mom's eyes softened. She nodded slowly. Your father and I talked about it. We want to focus on ourselves now. We spent so many years worrying about everyone else. You deserve to, I said. You deserve peace. They did, more than anyone I knew. Time rolled forward. Jacob and Madison began dropping off the kids at the lake house for visits. My parents adored having the grandchildren. There was no tension with the kids, just fishing lessons, rock skipping contests, sticky hands from homemade lemonade. The kids didn't understand the adult wars surrounding them. I never mentioned it. Jacob never came inside. He waited in the car during drop-off, gaze fixed forward. It was an unspoken understanding. The house was forbidden ground for him now. I visited often, talked with my nephews about school, video games, friendships. Nothing heavy, nothing complicated, just presence, just family. Eventually, the lake house became what it was always meant to be, a sanctuary. My parents found a joy there they'd been denied for decades, a softness, a new beginning. And for me, watching them at sunset on the terrace became its own quiet ritual, proof that the years of sacrifice had finally given them something back. The house was theirs, and no one, not Jacob, not Madison, not bitterness, not memory, could take it away from them. Not ever again.